Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week, new theme. We're going to be looking at stuff that is not rock or metal, just kind of everything else out there. We're starting off this week with a person, a group, a band, I don't know, an artist named Daughter. The track is called Mothers. Dive into this and see what's going on. See what they're bringing to the table. We're starting off very personal. There's almost an element of like looking back, like pensiveness in that fuzzy, the blurriness to that opening synth tone. So we've taken that opening synth line and paired it with the guitar. Interesting percussive concept there. We have two 16th notes into the every downbeat with an emphasized bass kick on every downbeat. Feeling a little faster now, so those bass beats have hit on 1 and 3. It's a little bit of pain in the vocals. Interesting just hearing it all come together. It's still very ethereal with all the layers included. Okay, I think that was our first little bit of sort of destructive elements, real crunchy, real gritty, that rhythmic element that came in. bittersweet, isn't it? That final synth tone, the one that had a real soft attack, kind of faded in on every hit, kind of sounded sort of honking, kind of like a saxophone. It kind of didn't fit, right? There was something real disruptive about it. Huh. This is an interesting one. It's when we start off the track, it like I said, it was kind of pensive, right? We have our opening synth sound, and it's sort of blurry, and that's kind of the best way I can put it. It's really hard to zone in on the exact original timbre. It's a synth. It kind of doesn't have an original. I mean, maybe like a sine wave or something is what its original tone is, but it's kind of weird to talk about digital instruments as having original timbre. It's not quite like a violin or a trumpet that kind of has that normal sound that we kind of associate with the instrument before we might put distortion or compression or reverb on it, right? We know what a guitar sounds like before we turn it into that metal guitar tone. It's kind of a weird thing to talk about digital sounds the same way, but what I'm trying to get at there is it's really hard to lock down what it's emulating, which I think is a good way to go about that. Like at the end, I mentioned that final synth tone to come in kind of sounded like a saxophone to me, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. I know it's a synth, the first sound we heard, but what is it emulating? What is it close to? What is an what is an acoustic analogy for it? And I can't really hone in on anything because it's really blurry. It has a bit of extra width to it. There's a little bit of reverb that kind of messes with the initial sounds, and it feels like it has all these extra elements on it that kind of I wish I knew what was going on here, production wise, to create this tone so I could speak about it better. I mean, the best I can, it sounds blurry to me. And I don't know how to convey that. I hope I got that across. If not, you're just gonna have to go along with me for the ride. I hear that very blurrily. If that doesn't make sense, I mean, I wish I could explain it. Um, So, it to me it feels it also feels very distant, right? There's some pensiveness to the notes that are chosen, right? And sort of the chord that they allude to. We don't really have an essence of chordal progression until the midpoint of the song, and then of course at the closing we have very strong element of chord progression. But here at the beginning, even when the acoustic guitar comes in, so play counterpoint with the synth idea, we're still getting single notes from both of them. So at best, we have dyads that allude to chordal ideas, but still no foundational instrument straight up playing chords for these melodies to soar over or to be played over. Soaring is definitely not the right adjective for how the melodies are played out here. Um, so it just it feels pensive to me. It feels like it's looking backwards, and like I said, it's kind of blurry, and I don't know how what emotion that kind of pulls from me. Tying it to the pensive mood at the beginning, especially when the vocals come in. I had mentioned that they're very quiet and isolated. I don't quite. I think I said pensive, maybe. I don't remember. I don't think I said vulnerable, because I mean it kind of is, but it really I don't get that vulnerability with it. It's more of just lacking of energy. It is isolating though, especially the opening element. We have just the synth and just the vocals, and there's really not a lot of power or volume or filling up of a sound sphere. It's just very, very small right here. And small and quiet and isolated. That's really what I got out of the beginning, with a little side of pensiveness. Looking back is kind of the vibe I'm getting there. Um, but it's very solemn, right? The whole song is. And it was interesting because we had like what, 8 bars maybe of this, and then we had 8 bars of uh, this bass heavy section. And by the time I really started to get a picture of what was going on, we moved to the next section, which had the return of the opening synth with the acoustic guitar, and sort of doing a call and response thing there, where one of them was playing on the offbeats and the other one was playing on the downbeats. But I was just thinking, how quickly we're moving between these ideas. And it made me think of what we checked out on Saturday, listening to some post rock. And, I talked about how some of the sections were just lasting for a very long time. And I almost wonder if this is sort of the opposite of that, where people who really enjoy post rock and droning think that this song is just moving way too fast at too much of a blistering speed for them to really get the emotion of what each of these sections was trying to envelop. But anyways, we move into this next major section. I'm not going to count that little interlude there because, like I said, honestly, before I could even realize what was going on, I had barely picked up on all the timbres. I think we had 2 new timbres there, and both of them were doing completely new ideas. We shifted back into a variation of our first verse. And here we had the synth and the vocals brought back, but we had this other guitar part. And it was really interesting to hear, like I said, sort of the call and response, where you would get the downbeat with one instrument and the offbeat with the other, and kind of not call and response, sort of a very rigid form of completely blanking out on the term, which is so weird. But it's when multiple instruments it's take the same melody line. A hocket. There we go. Don't know why that was escaping my mind. When you take a central melody line, which here could just be a series of eighth notes with melodic movement, pitch movement, and instead of giving it all to one instrument, you kind of dole it out piecemeal. Maybe you get one note, then you get two, and then you get two, and then you get three, and then you get one, and then you get two. So especially if you have any panning on it, it sounds like the melody's bouncing around, but also because the timbres are different, it makes the melody have a very different hit, a very different feel to it. So assuming we have a very rigid eighth note concept here, we could probably argue that the synth and the guitar are hocketing this main idea, because I don't think they deviate. They always alternate. It's really rigid, which I don't particularly enjoy hocket that's rigid like this. 2 notes and 2 notes and 2 notes, or in this case, alternating every note. It works, and it has its purpose. I think it was effective here, but I just enjoy my hocket to have a little bit more diversity to the instrumental weighting to it. Um, and then we kind of loop these core ideas for a little bit. There's a moment where I think it's the next section, where we bring in that bass heavy tone again that we heard in the interlude, not in the interlude, the intermission. That little, I guess you could call it foreshadowing to this part, possibly. And we have these two 16th note hits into the downbeat strike, which is a bass kick, and the 2/8 note hit, or the 2/16th note hits, are on some sort of cymbal. I think it's actually 2 instruments, because it almost has a bit of the abrupt choppiness of like a wood block, but it also has a little bit of shimmer to it, like a small cymbal, right? Not something that's going to ring out, but just, or you know what, maybe even a closed hi-hat, just enough to get that metallic clinking sound, right? but with a little bit more of the thunk of a woodblock. So yeah, it might be two instruments, or it could just be a lot of effects that kind of combine them together. I mean, I've said before that people who make tones, digital tones, are just like wizards to me. They really are. Like, typically, I mean, I'm kind of getting more into it, but I still haven't made my own sound yet. I still use pre-mades when I'm working on my digital music, but I mean, I use what's available to me, right? I mean, it's my prior to getting into digital music, my whole life has been writing sheet music for, orchestras or trios or big bands, stuff that I'm familiar with. Even when I was writing rock music in my band back in high school, I think it was, I didn't have to play around with tones. This is the guitar, this is the bass, these are the vocals. I knew what their timbre was, I knew what they sounded like. And then I just have this admiration for digital artists who not only have to write the music, but also create the sounds that play their music. And it's just this whole it's this entirely other aspect to music writing, and it just blows my mind sometimes. And so I guess there's a possibility that this could be a single tone that sounds like two acoustic items put together. But I really like it. It's interesting. But we have these two hits into a very wide booming bass hit. I'd even say that there's quite a bit of sub bass on it. There's a bit that I can feel, right? Not just hear. And I originally felt this in a much slower tempo. So even though I say that it's 2/16 notes into a downbeat hit, in actuality it's probably 2/8 notes into a downbeat hit, but instead of every downbeat, we're looking at beats 1 and 3, which is interesting because in a lot of driving rock beats, having a bass kick on 1 and 3 is not abnormal. In fact, it's commonly used with a snare hit on 2 and 4. So you get the ka, ka, ka. And it provides a nice rhythm to everything while having some diversity in sounds. You get the lowness of the bass and then the higher crack of the snare. And if you do it faster, punk, thrash metal, early black metal, extreme metal, you can really get some driving energy, right? And here we get just that low beat on that low hit on beat 1, and we don't get the follow up. It's almost sounds like it's lingering to me. And I don't know if that's intentional. That's kind of what I feel coming from listening to so much rock and metal on the channel. I mean, even jazz drumming and actually some classical music works with this idea as well, alternating lower hits and higher hits, whether it's a drum kit in a jazz band or a freestanding snare and bass drum in an orchestra. It's a really popular standardized way of driving simple beats and momentum in your percussion section. And it's again, I don't know if this is intentional. I don't know if they wanted it to feel like this, but it does feel just like stationary. It feels like it wants to move, or at least I want it to move. It feels incomplete. There is the bass kick and not its accompanying snare. It's the home, but we don't see where it went from the home. We don't have the contrast. We don't have the direction. Um, it's just home. We talk about pedal notes occasionally, and the cool thing about a pedal note is that when you move away from it, you can feel yourself moving away from it. I mean, even the terminology right there, you move away from it. And because it's a pedal note, especially in riff-based music like metal, we tend to return to it. So we can feel this distance of getting away from it and returning, and we can feel this distance in the music. And here there's no distance being covered. It's just this stationary idea. But because of those two quick staccato hits that come before it, there's this drive, this momentum to get into it. It's kind of they're kind of doing the same thing that we would expect from grace notes, right? A way to lean into a note technically before it gets there, right? Before we actually hit the beat, we're still kind of starting the idea of the note. Or in punk music that makes a lot of use of offbeat hits to create driving energy, we have things like this where we have a strike on the end of four into the downbeat of one to drive this extra energy to really charge into this next bar. And here we have this moving into where we've been. It feels like it's driving nowhere. It's momentum with no direction. Momentum to stand still, an urgency to not move. It's very interesting. I can't wait to get into the lyrics and kind of see what's going on here. Because the song, as I'm describing everything I'm hearing, kind of sounds depressed. There's this motivation to go do stuff, but according to the drums, we never do. There's this constant looking backwards that I kind of feel in that opening synth line. I said there's a pensiveness to it. Even by the end of the track, I mentioned it was bittersweet. We started to build up ideas, right? We had all the layers going on, but it was still sort of lethargic. And there's still elements, at least to me, that kind of look towards the past. There is some brightness to it, so maybe there's hope for the future, but again, it just doesn't want to go anywhere. And I'm just that's what this whole song is to me thematically, is a drive to get nowhere, a momentum, an energy that just doesn't get utilized. It's a very frustrating song. It feels frustrated. When I say it's a frustrating song, I don't mean that it frustrates me as a listener. I feel like the song itself is frustrated. It wants to do something and can't. It feels alone. And it feels like maybe there's this drive to not be alone, but it's just you can't get away from it, right? Even when the drums bring out an idea of momentum, it still doesn't amount to anything. With that said, though, there's a lot of beauty in that final moment when we finally get all the layers going and we don't have any of these false starts or possible foreshadowings. We finally have everything brought together. And I use the word bittersweet because, it is a very beautiful way to finish out the song, but at the same time, it just doesn't feel whole. It doesn't feel complete. There's still this element of, longing for something you don't have in there. And I don't know what it is. These are probably things that we'll find answered in the lyrics, hopefully. I mean, I guess it could just be a song that's looking at a single emotion and then just putting some words to it. I can't say that I would not be a little disappointed by that, but it's always a chance we run, right? We talk about this all the time where, some bands write music that they just naturally gravitate to, and the lyrics are just kind of this other element. They don't always have to pair with the music. So, yeah, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting though. The last thing I want to talk about is the vocals. Then we're going to get into some lyrics. We'll see what's going on. But, vocally, I mentioned at the beginning, it's very isolated, right? The only thing that she has to sing with, the only accompanying part is a a synth line that to me feels blurry. It feels hard to define. It's sort of off in the distance. It's there, but it's not there, kind of idea. And as the song progresses on, the music begins to get stronger, but the vocals don't really. They continue to be that soft spoken, sort of isolating, pensive, a vulnerable sound, I guess. I don't really like the word vulnerable here, but it's the best way I think I can describe it because it's not low energy. It feels like there's volume being used to create this sound. It has a very warm tone, a very full tone to it, but it's also very quiet. It's kind of withheld and reserved. And it feels like it's alone, even though the music around it is swelling up and layers are building up and the song itself is becoming more full and complete, and it's not changing at all. It's still static. It's how it was at the beginning. The only time I really felt a huge shift in it was 3 minutes into the track when there was a crack in the vocals, and I had mentioned that I felt a lot of pain at that moment, but after that it seemed they went right back into it. So I don't know if that was an intentional thing, thematically, or maybe it was just a specific line they were trying to emphasize. Maybe it's just the way that they sing. Sometimes you get little vocal imperfections that pop up in your vocal style, and you just learn to deal with them. No different than like a country twang, right? It's it's kind of something you don't ever want to happen if you're a pop singer or an opera singer, but in country music, it's kind of the status quo. So it's really all about context, and maybe this is just something that she does when she makes certain jumps. She kind of allows her voice to crack to get through them. I don't know. Let's dive into the lyrics, I suppose, and see what's going on with all of this. I have a lot of questions. Fairly short. We have 4 verses and a bridge. The only reason I don't call it another verse is because its structure is entirely different, but it doesn't look like it's repeated at all. So verse 1 says, "You will grow all you need to grow inside my spine, and then take what you need to take. What's yours is mine. And then just give all you want to it, to something new. I'll stay here, the provider of the constant sting they called love." So, assuming that the name of the song is our thesis statement, this is a track about mothers. The idea is that, we could possibly be talking about children because that's where the term mother comes from. It's a parental figure. You grow a child in your body. So you grow them with all of their needs in your spine. That's kind of an interesting way to word that, but I'm kind of getting that vibe of, within oneself. It says, and you take what you need to take, what's yours is mine. So, I mean, that could be, the nourishment, right? The mother eating for two phrase. But it could also be, you know, mm, So we could also pass this around as not just growing inside the spine literally as within the body, but also physical toil of a mother providing for a young child, picking up after toys and carrying them and changing them and leaning over changing tables and like all the stress that you can put on your body, that's required to take care of a child. And we can even look at, my house, my food, my finances, everything that used to be mine is now yours as well, right? So you can take what you need. And it says, and then just give all you want of it to something new. I'll stay here, the provider of the constant sting. The constant sting they call love. I mean, is that saying like, I do all I can to raise you and eventually, maybe. Okay, so, all right, we're going to move to verse 2 because I only have a half baked idea here. I want to see where this goes. You'll drain all you need to drain out of me. All the colors have washed away, no more rosy sheen, not a pale, isolated, shallow, not just a pale, isolated, shallow water place. Oh, what a place I call myself. Verse 3. Oh, love all you need to love before it goes. When your face becomes a stranger's, I don't know. You will never remember who I was to you carried in the womb. Okay, so I'm trying to like run with the bittersweet element here, and we're going to go back to verse 1. It says, and I give all you want of it. Oh, and then give all you want of it to something, to some new thing. And I think what they're saying here is like you are a child's world, right? And you give them everything so that they can grow. You give them your love, you give them housing, you give them your physical toil, you give them your mental energy, your mental strain. You know, raising children is not easy. It is a full body task, right? Mental, emotional, stress, physical, it's all of it. And it's extremely rewarding, I will say from firsthand, but it is difficult. And so, what I kind of get here is that, I'll give you all of this, all of my energy. And, they start out giving it back to you, right? You're their everything. But at a point in life, they are going to have other aspirations, hobbies or jobs, starting their own families, relationships and stuff like that, their friends. There's going to be a point where the stuff that I've given you, you're going to give to something new, which could be these hobbies or, relationships or friends or jobs or, whatever, schooling. And while you, the child, gives these resources to something else, I'll stay here, the provider of that constant sting they call love. So I put all this energy out there and I love this child so much, and they are growing distant from me. I think that's where she's getting at. And I mean, it couldn't have lined up any better. Assuming that the vocals are the musical personification of the narrator, the mother, the music could even be the child. It continues to grow and build. We continue to see the layers grow on top of each other as the song becomes stronger and more independent of the vocals, who kind of get drowned out a little bit by the end. And the vocals are sort of static, where the vocals and the music fit at the beginning. One musical item, one vocal, both sort of in the same area of emotion. By the end of the song, the vocals don't really fit as much. The song is huge and bolsterous, and there's a ton of layers to it, and it's, like I said, it's kind of getting a bit brighter. The vocals are still a bit bitter, or not bitter, mellow. And that's where the bittersweet aspect comes from, is the contrast between the vocal delivery and the musical aspect. I even talked about the drums, the concept of standing still because of the bass kick. And right here in the lines, all stay here. This element of not moving. The provider of that constant sting they called love. So I'll continue to provide you with love even if you don't return it. I will still love you always, kind of idea. And then this is almost taken into a more negative angle. Says, you will drain all that you need to drain out of me, almost to say that it's not a symbiotic relationship but almost a parasitic one. To say that the mother has no choice. They will always love and always provide, even if they're getting nothing out of it. Says, you'll drain me, all the colors have washed away, no more rosy sheen. Not just a pale, isolated, shallow water place. Oh, what a place I call myself. I don't understand this line at all. It is interesting, though, that at least right here, she doesn't know what to call herself, or maybe she does and she doesn't want to speak it yet. Oh, what a place I call myself. I call myself. It's repeated, those four syllables. And then we move on to verse 3, though, and says, "Oh, love all you need to love before it goes. When your face becomes a stranger, I don't know." There's a comma there between strangers and I don't know. They're two separate ideas. It's not saying that it's a stranger I don't know, which is just an oxymoron. I mean, or not. It's a redundancy. It says, "When your face becomes a stranger's, I don't know. You will never remember who I was to you carried in the womb." And this almost feels like a reversal. This could feel like a daughter speaking to her mother. You don't remember who I was to you. You carried me in the womb, and you're not ever, you're not going to remember that. Your face is a stranger to me. I mean, this whole song could just be about, um, the strain of kids growing up and possibly having that parental child relationship kind of have distance between them as the child grows up and becomes more individual, take on their own life, whether they want to start a family or dig into their career or whatever they choose to do. That distance happens. There's less and less time, or more and more time between when you speak, when those phone calls are made, that kind of vibe, until the two become strangers. It's been months since we've talked to each other, kind of thing. The bridge part comes in, says, "I'm called mother, I'm called mother, they're called home. They called mothers." I don't know, there's a lot of weird repetition here and flipping around of idle words. It says, "I'm called mother" twice. It says, "They're called home" twice. It repeats the "they're called," replaces that with "they called." So instead of "they are called," they called. They cried out for something, right? And then it just says mothers. They called mothers. And that's another interesting part too. The title is called Mothers, and I think, yeah, it's a deliberate multiplier here. There's more than one mother, and like I want to extrapolate this to an idea that it's speaking about all mothers around the world, but I can't. I don't. I mean, maybe. The thing is, though, is that not every parent-child relationship is going to become distant and strained, especially not to the point where the mother forgets who the child is to them, what they carried in the womb, as they said. It makes me feel like it's a very specific set of mothers. This sounds like a personal song, especially with the pain that we're about to enter somewhere around here. I don't remember what line it was, but we're getting nearer to the end of the song, which is when it happens. It feels more personal than global. It's not like a generic love song, right? Where it's kind of poppy, but you can tell it's about heartbreak, but it's not really sad. It doesn't really feel like there's any stakes at play. This feels like a song that's very personal. I don't know. Let's look at this final verse. We return to this concept, this parasitic idea. It says, "Give all you need to give, and sometimes they won't take what they need to take. The strangest chemical reactions inside of her brain. No, she's not the same, she's not the same, she's not the same." And if verse 3, as I believe, is told from the child's perspective, are we still there? The bridge kind of alludes to maybe not, because it goes back to being "I'm called mother." But it definitely seems like a younger person is speaking to an older person, or maybe it is an older person talking to a younger person. I don't know. This is a very vague track lyrically, but somebody has had a chemical reaction inside the brain that has changed them. And I'm trying to think of this, and like I'm coming up with, a head injury, but I don't know if that's really chemical. That'd be more physical, right? So then I'm thinking drugs, maybe. and maybe they have a family member who abuses drugs, and it changes who they are, and maybe there's some permanent damage there. But then I think about permanent damage, and I'm like, oh, is this a brain disease? You know, is this some sort of amnesia, or long term memory disorder? Is this what they're talking about here? And I don't know. But it definitely seems that somebody in this story has changed mentally. They're not the same person they were. And, the drugs could allude to a younger person, like a child. It could also be an older person, but my biases kind of put that to be a more of a younger age. But then I think of like brain disease, and I think of an older person. So I don't know. And this bridge just continues to get me. I'm called mother, and they're called home, but they called mothers. I don't know. I mean, it might even be. I feel like I'm grasping a bit here, so I'm not going to dive into this concept too heavily. I'm just going to kind of float it out there. What if this was multi generational, and that brings in the concepts of mothers? You have the daughter and her mother, and then her mother. So we have the one in the middle who feels her child growing up and distancing herself from her, growing up and just whatever, right? Like I said, career, family, whatever. That's verse 1. Verse 2, I'm still not quite sure what to make of it other than the opening line, which just goes into this idea of, parents always providing anything. You'll drain all that you need to drain from me. Verse 3, I still think is from the idea of a child to a mother, but maybe we're still talking about this person that we were embodied in the first two verses, but now we're looking at her mother. So instead of looking down a generation, we're looking up a generation. Um, and this person's face is becoming a stranger, possibly alluding to this brain disease that we kind of get hinted at with verse 4, because this person is not the same anymore. I don't know. Like I said, I feel like that one's stretching it a bit, but there's this real, it almost feels negative, right? The entire song. It almost has this air that being a parent is great, but it's also terrible. And I mean, it kind of has this vibe also of, mothers have a thankless job. They give and give and give. And even in one case, if I'm right, which kind of, I mean, it kind of breaks one of these lines, but it says, it kind of makes it feel like the child, this middle generation, gives not just to her daughter, but also gives to her parent. And it breaks what I think is the lyrical pattern here. So I'm kind of walking back from that one a little bit, but there's this bittersweet element, like mothers, have this a thankless job, which is something you hear all the time, or at least I did. I don't know, it might have been more boomer humor. I don't really experience much of that anymore, but that concept of mothers have a thankless job is something that's kind of ingrained in my brain. Um, and Yeah, and I think this song kind of embodies that. It talks about all the toil that mothers put into raising their children, and even maybe possibly caring for their parents when they become too old to care for themselves. And it's just, it's bittersweet because it's all this love, right? In any other story, it'd be like, hey, I love my kids so much. This is what I do for them. I love my mom so much. This is what I do for her. It's just a real loving family. Everybody loves each other. But here it's sort of like the darker side of that. It's not all cherry blossoms and orchids. That's a weird metaphor. There's weight, there's toil, there's payment for all of this love, you know? It's something that can weigh on one's mind, especially if you're beginning to feel isolated, which I think this song kind of represents. It's a person stuck in the middle of two familiar relationships with plenty of love to give, but also kind of feeling like they're running on empty, never really getting any love back to fill the tank back up. The love reserve is going low kind of vibe. I don't know. I guess it's just a good time to remember to call your mom and say you love her if you have that opportunity. Um, in the US at least, yesterday was Mother's Day, which is why I picked to do this one today, honestly. Um, and I was kind of expecting something a little brighter though. But like I said, I think it's a good reminder that it's, being a parent, even specifically in this case, a mother, is a tough job. And sometimes, just a phone call or a hug is enough to kind of make it all worthwhile, right? And, it's good to make that phone call today because you don't know when your parents will pass. Long time watchers of the channel will remember a couple years back when my father passed unexpectedly. So you never know when it'll happen. So, call your mom today. I guess that's the message of both the song and this reaction. Those are my thoughts on daughters. No, daughters, possessive, mothers, plural. Go ahead and leave your comments in the comment section. Let me know what's up, if you enjoyed this or not, anything that kind of stood out to you, if you think my interpretation is correct or not. Um, whatever you want to post down there. And above that is the description box, and in there's a link for Linktree. I'll take you to this menu. It's got everything related to the channel, merch, Patreon, Discord, Twitter, a bunch of stuff. If you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. That's above the description box. That's this video. We have a special selection that came out about 15 minutes ago if you want to check that one out. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We'll be continuing on with this week's theme of not rock or metal, and we'll look at another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.